My name is Nanda Mabenge. Originally from Umtata, but I've spent some time in PE. And currently based in Cape Town. I work a lot with the higher education sector. I got an independent consulting company called Nanda Mabenge Consulting. And I use the company sort of as a platform to create awareness and also to teach on what it means to be transgender. So what I do is I use my personal journey as a transgender man as a resource to catalyze for access for others who need to be linked to care. So I think for me off the bat, what always strikes me is how everyone, I think it's a quote from Paulo Coelho, everyone seems to have a clear idea of how others should live their lives, but none about his or her own. And I think that's where my life really started, all of our lives, because we're born and we're assigned genders, we're given names. And so growing up in Umtata, it's a peri-urban area, very much set in its ways, you know, in its cultures and its days, its ways of life. And I mean, from a very young age, I realized that what everyone is telling me who I am and socializing me into becoming is not who I am. But there are rules. I mean, I have to go to school, I have to go to church, you know, and there's a certain way I need to present in school and present in church. Because what I realized much later in my life is that because we come from a patriarchal structure, because my grandfather's the head of this house and his reputation needs to be intact at all times. So you have to present to protect that. And so when I go to school, I have to dress in a certain way. When I go to church, I have to dress in a certain way. There would be days where I would cry and fight with my mother, this woman who I knew as my mother at the time. Why can't you just let me dress the way that I dress? No, because you are a girl and you are not a boy, so this is how girls dress. So that's how I grew up, and getting into my life, I learned when I'm 11 that my mother's not my mother, she's actually my aunt. And so I go and live with my parents in PE, and you know, for the next 8 years, I go through a lot of trauma, psychological, physical, emotional abuse, and I have to suppress the who that I know I am and I feel to be, because I'm dealing with these imminent issues right now. And so when I leave the parents in PE and go to study at UCT in Cape Town in the year 2000, I start sort of coming out of the shell, but I don't have any language, I don't have any resources, I don't know what's going on with me. Yes, I'm aware that I'm attracted to women, but I don't feel aligned in terms of this body that I'm in. And so I actually choose because it feels acceptable, more acceptable. I mean, it's the year 2000, 2001. It feels more acceptable to actually allow myself to identify as a butch lesbian, and I become the butchest of the butch, literally. The butchest of the butch. But over time, and even though I can align in terms of my sexual attractions, I don't feel complete in terms of who I am and how my body expresses itself. So after a couple of years, I actually started Googling what does it mean to be a man but be in a woman's body. And that's when I actually realized, this is around 2006, 2007. So before that, I have no idea. I just know what everyone else tells me to be. I can move in spaces with the macho guys because, hey, you know, butch lesbians, you guys are cool, man. You're one of the boys, you know? So that's fine. But as a human being, I still am not quite fitting in terms of who I am. Firstly, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents towards the end of their lives. And one thing I've noticed with elderly people, when they're closer to death, they start behaving better. And you know, the conversations we had, I realized that many people would probably make different choices and pass different judgments if they could turn back time. But in terms of the community, I think my community saw me journey. I think they saw me journey and they chose to journey with me. In as much as it's a peri-urban area where they're very much entrenched and indoctrinated in terms of their traditions, like Asana, I never felt the need to introduce myself as a lesbian. One day, I went to and bought boxer shorts at Woolworths, and I washed them, and I put them up in the washing line. So they saw that, hey, this one is now wearing boxer shorts. Because that is the only language that is the only tool I could use to be, and you know, because I didn't feel the need to summon a meeting and tell people this is who I am. And so I think because I affirmed and asserted myself within that community, they journeyed with me. Fortunately or not, my parents had already passed away at this time, and so they could not be part of that journey. But from what I hear, they knew, they had an idea, but they just couldn't quantify it into words, and it would dent their image for this child to present as an abomination when we have raised this child to be part of this particular community. So I think the community back at home in Umtata saw me journey, and they slotted themselves along the way in terms of the journey. And again, I think that's where people become selective. Because remember, I said that my grandfather's reputation was quite important, and so we had to preserve and protect it at all times. And I think part of that played in my favor a lot. Because once they could see that this Tishalu Tanana's grandchild is on this journey, it kind of like made it easier for them to bend their sort of rules and kind of like accommodate me in those spaces where I wouldn't be accommodated normally. For an example, when we talk about the right to passage of young men going into the bush, I mean, I will go sometimes, but I feel even in those spaces, those are not spaces for me to exist in because they are rife with patriarchy, and the language is extremely exclusionary because even there, I'm still an outlier. It's almost as though, but you are fine, but everyone else isn't, you know? So I think for communities and society as a whole, we need to understand that cultures evolve. Human beings evolve. Hence the title Becoming Him. It's an ever sort of, to become is to begin to be. We all become in our different sort of lives, in our different journeys, wherever, however you identify, whoever you are. You're not the same person you were 20 years ago. You know, so we continuously become. So I think these conversations, like I think it was Wesley who said, we don't talk on the home level, and that's where the problem starts. Because our homes are not safe spaces. And if our homes are not safe spaces, then there's a very big problem. Because we can't expect society to be a safe space when the home that is rearing this child to be part of society is not a safe space in itself. So we need to find ways to actually plant those seeds and have these conversations start on the home level. And I mean, part of the work that I do is also to allow young people access to me and have them take me with them if they want me to actually have a sit down and chat to their families. Because the minute human beings can actually see you, that you're a human, you're not actually green just because you've transitioned. They actually start lowering their ridiculous expectations, you know? And then that's where the human conversation starts. So I think we need an overhaul of how things are done on a micro level, and it's the home base that where we need to start having these conversations. Some generations are going to have to die out. Yes. But if we go back to the core of being African, if I may, there's no language for gender there are no pronouns in our languages. So that already speaks to the foreign and the borrowed words and literature that we have in terms of classifying our queerness or putting it out there because it's a way of expressing ourselves. So we don't have these languages. So perhaps that's another area that needs to be worked. We need to find the language so that we can break it down in terms of lay terms. That and generations dying, and also going back to the core of who we are. We are spiritual beings. Africans, I don't care what shape, size, or color you are, we are connected. There's a thread that connects us, and it's our spiritual selves. And we need to also go back to the core of our spirituality before the advent of colonialism. And go back to how things were back then. How did every single human being had a place in society? That is how Africans are. So we need to go back and remove these blinkers, these binary blinkers that we have imported from the West, and just go back and filter things down, decant things, and figure out how we existed and how we lived before we mapped these borrowed cultures and ways of doing things on our lives. If we had retained our Africanism and not adopted certain facets of other traditions and cultures, then that would be perfect because it worked perfectly back then. But now we run the risk of having so many people fall through the cracks because there's not even a spectrum that we presented to say, perhaps you fall somewhere along this spectrum and this is what it could potentially look like. So it's not looking at absolute language as an absolute definitive, this is the black and this is the white, but it's trying to meet ourselves halfway, if I can put it like that, because we have evolved. We are no longer not in spaces where we are living with definitions and justifications of how things are. So we need to find a way to kind of like bridge that gap, but not in absolute rigid manners like the binaries have done. So that we don't run, my biggest fear is that people continuously fall through the cracks. They don't know where to locate themselves because they don't even know if a spectrum exists or not. For example, I met a transgender man who is about 48 years old this year, had never heard of anything about being transgender, knew nothing, but he heard me speaking on radio on Mhlobonweni, and I battled because there are no words in person. But he managed to get a hold of me and we spoke it out, and now he's getting the care that he needs. Do you get what I'm saying? So we need to find a spectrum of language somehow so that we are able to link people to care and also relate better in terms of our sort of individual beings, if I can put it like that, in terms of family. Look, I got to a point where I really don't give a hoot about my family. You get to a point where you just develop a thick skin and you just do. I mean, if I hadn't met people like Robert, I met Robert, I think 2007, 8, 9, and he was one of the few people that I could relate to because I could see his becoming, and you know, so I've developed a network of people who have become family. I don't believe family is necessarily blood. But going back to your question, I've got one. So my maternal family is my heart. They are the people who will go and do the research, will go and watch, you know, Caitlyn Jenner on the Kardashians. Oh, did you know? You know, so they are the people who are actually vested in trying to journey this journey as best as they can with me. So they are always, you know, walking with me continuously. So I've been very fortunate in that sense. The paternal family are not happy about the book at all, because you are fine as long as you don't put us out there, because it's our surname, you know. And I had to get to a point where I wanted to tell my story because, again, there's no blueprint for being queer, right? There's no manual. Each journey is unique, each journey is different. Some people have to go through trauma like any other human being, and then they emerge in their becoming. So I wanted to tell my story, and in telling the story, to also highlight the themes. I mean, I've had substance abuse issues, mental health issues, child abuse. I've been there, you know. So it was also just, like I said, I use my journey as a resource to catalyze for access, and I believe that writing and putting the story down would help a lot of people. So I think people can buy my book outside, it's there, and that will help them to get into this journey. No, I'm just joking, guys. But I think it's, you need to figure you out for you. You need to spend time with yourself and figure out where you are and where you want to go, how important these be. Like, for example, with my grandmother, she was 90 years old, and the only reason why I called her is because I used to call her every day. But I was going to feature in a magazine, and I didn't want her to see it in a magazine before having a conversation with me. Not that I was, you know, calling a meeting for whatever the case may be. And I've been talking to a 90-year-old about penises and breast removals. I mean, we never even had conversations about relationships, you know. And she was all right with that. She told me it's not for her to accept or reject me. Hers is to be who she has always been to me. So I think we need to, one then needs to then engage, but even going into that conversation, I knew there was a possibility that I would lose her forever. And I was okay with that because it meant that I could continue being who I am.
Yeah.
So at some point we need to also push back strategically and smart, in smart ways, because we are not for our families to pull apart as and when they please every single time. They need to realize that we can sustain, we can live, we can be formidable members of society, and if they want to be part of those journeys, then great. If not, they can take a break. We are always there. You know, it's one of those things. We need to develop that resilience and that strong will to just, it's being human as it is not easy, guys. I'm coming back as a horse in my next life. I cannot do this without being human. So being human as it is let alone being a queer human being. So we need to have that resolve and the passion to fall in love with who you are and know that you are your number one supporter.
Yeah.
Come